Anybody still need it? All good? Okay, we'll get started shortly. Thanks everybody for coming. Great turnout. Great to see everybody here. Sorry about the rescheduling, but you know, can't control Mother Nature sometimes. So yeah, very excited to have all you here. Great turnout. In general, though, we're really excited about the Axure meetup group. As a whole, we're up to close to 150 members. Yes. Yeah. Give yourselves a hand. I think it was just a few weeks ago we were ecstatic about hitting triple digits, and now we're almost halfway to 200. So it's been great to see the growth. I think this is only our 6th meetup, so it really hasn't even been that long. I think our first meetup was in late October of last year, so we keep growing. It's been great, you know, word of mouth and using other organizations to help bring people in, and certainly our presenter this evening, I'm sure, had a lot to do with the uptick in members and people coming this evening. So along with you guys, I'm looking forward to the presentation this evening. A few other housekeeping things. We've had 6 meetups. About 5 of them have been here at Acuity Group. We had one over at Sears. We were grateful for them for hosting. But we're always looking for any other organizations or individuals. If you got a large basement or anything, we're always open to different types of venues to host these events. So certainly get in touch with myself or Svet or Stephanie, and we're always open to making this a traveling road show, you know, preferably somewhere around downtown Chicago. We definitely enjoy having you guys here, but we're always open to other venues. And then the same goes for topics. We have a great presenter this evening. But I know a lot of you have been to previous Axure meetups, but if you haven't, we usually use a pretty open, informal format. We love doing the whole show and tell type thing. We love having people from different organizations come in and show what kind of work they've been doing in Axure, how they're using it in their design process. Along with any, you know, maybe if you're on a project and you're just having issues with something, come in and you'll be shocked by the kind of feedback that you get. We have everything from beginners to very advanced Axure users here, and we're all very friendly and love to pitch in and try and help people out with any kind of Axure issues that you're having. So keep that in mind. Again, if you have any topics or if your organization is interested in presenting, again, just talk to one of the 3 of us in person or shoot us an email on the meetup website, and we'd love to hear any kind of ideas that you might have. A few other things. The meetup, unfortunately, is not free. This is something that we're kind of paying for to bring everyone together. So again, we're not planning on having any kind of membership fees or anything, but if you're open to doing donations, we have a contribution box right next to the pizza. So if you are so inclined on your way out, donations are always welcome, but we definitely hope to keep this free for as long as possible because we love being able to bring everyone together. What other housekeeping things? Axure sponsorship. Oh yes, we would definitely like to thank where the pizza came from, and that came from the gracious folks at Axure, who are not represented here on the phone. They're out in California, but they were gracious enough to reach out to us when we were looking for food memberships, and they kind of stepped up and said, we'd love to pick up the pizza. So all the pizza 2 events ago and at this event is courtesy of Axure. So we're very thankful that they're pitching in, and it sounds like they're going to continue to do so. So we're excited about that. The cookies, however, are not from Axure. They are from Ms. Stephanie there in the back. So any compliments on the cookies can go directly to her.
They keep coming and you get more.
Yep. I think that's about it. Yeah, that's it for housekeeping. So you guys found the food, kitchen's next door, bathrooms across the hall. We'll get started here shortly. First of all, I'm going to introduce Svet, who's been with us from the very beginning. Very avid Axure user. Is one of the guys who always loves to help anyone who comes to our meetups with any issues that they're having. And Svet was gracious enough to reach out to our presenter tonight, so I will let Svet take over and introduce our speaker.
All right, thanks Adam. Hi, I'm Svet. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate to see some new faces as well as some returning members. Well, tonight's speaker, Ezra Schwartz, was there to tell the crowd about Ezra. Well, let's start with the fact that he wrote a book on Axure 6.0. He was gracious enough to provide us with a discount code, which is posted on Meetup, so feel free to make use of that great offer. What else about Axure? He's from Chicago, 15 years of experience, if not more, in the design field. And he's also the organizer behind Axure World. There will be an upcoming sessions held annually, so look forward to some information on that. Without further ado, everybody, Ezra Schwartz.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? All right. So, Stephanie, Svet, Adam, thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you all for coming. It's a real pleasure to be with colleagues. Before I spoke with Stephanie, and I think one of the best things I like about our profession is to get to meet fantastic people. I don't know if the rest is really, I care for that much sometimes, but people are fantastic. So when I was approached to do this presentation, believe me, I'm not that lazy, but I really didn't feel like standing here and talking to you for a long time, because I know that we know that that's not how we learn things, and maybe better ways. It's actually a fantastic size, and this is a fantastic room, and so I'm hoping that I planned 2 activities which may or may not work. You know, there's the saying, it works in practice, but does it work in theory? Here is, it works in theory. I don't know if it's going to work in practice, but we have some breakaway sessions where there'll be opportunities to actually hash up some questions and then get together and talk about it. So I need someone to actually keep up the time because I'm going to lose it. Next thing I want to show is actually switch right away. Some of you, I'm going to talk about you because it'll take forever to go through the room, and I know it's, so if you don't mind, there was a survey. If you did not fill the survey and you happen to have a laptop, jump into it maybe when you can after. But this is what we have here in the room, maybe, because I don't know if everyone will filled it. So 26 people answered as of now. Who of you, who did not fill out the survey? I don't want to embarrass you, but okay, so not bad. So we have here, the first question was how many years of experience? So the majority, 0 to 2 years. Then we have another big chunk of about 40%, so about even. And then we have some people with over 9 years of UX experience. So that's fantastic. Years of Axure experience. So we have some real newbies, all in all. People without much experience, and we have a few people with 4 years and up. Axure has been around for about 10 or 11 years, but who's counting? But I've been using it since 96-7. I started to kind of deal with it. It doesn't really matter, but it's good to know. Axure proficiency, so people were honest, and it looks like the majority are proficient without variables. Well, I could have chosen anything. I didn't know how do you qualify proficiency? So someone can be proficient, meaning you can do your job or you feel you can do what you want to do with the tool, but up to a certain point. And beyond that point, for a variety of reasons, some of them actually can be fantastically good reasons, which we'll talk about today. You don't want to go beyond that. And that's fine. In my opinion, that's proficiency. And then the people who are experts, again, it probably feels that you feel you can do whatever you want. This was I love to ask this. Spec generators. So many of you have no experience with that, and then more of you, those of you who do have experience, have a negative experience. So if you did that, you know why. Some of you also have good experience. It's good to know. But spec generators we'll talk about also about the specifications. And then just in general, it looks like we have many people who are in-house, people in in-house teams, people from agencies, consultants. others won't go through, others and then freelancers. So I'll share all of this, but again, if you did not do it, fill it up so we'll have a good representation. So this is how you are in an aggregate, kind of a non-personal way, but that's good to know. And it's good to know because when you talk about a tool, in a way, it kind of will be important to reference some of the experience. I don't know if you remember what was on that meetup description, but if you're like me, and I wrote it, but not necessarily. What I do remember about it was that this is not a tutorial about really how to move things around in Axure. It's more about how to think about Axure strategically and how to plan and how to actually know what you're getting into. And Axure is a great tool. Actually, I have some slides actually about what I am. You can, that's a survey, just so you know, we did that. So I'm working now on this book. Svet was very graciously mentioned this Axure 6. So I'm working with my colleague Elizabeth Schrail on the Axure 7 book. The nice thing about it, it's not even out yet, not even in beta. So it's a great thing to write about something that you don't even know what it is. I'm sure so. Coming up with a book before it comes up will be an interesting read. Some things about me that you will not find on the web, maybe. And I won't talk about myself because you can look it up if you didn't. But now I'm working on a large responsive project. I'm very interested in what your thoughts are and what people think about responsive. Who does not know what responsive? Again, I don't want to embarrass you. Who knows what responsive is? Yeah, all of you, most of you know what it is. So that's the first thing about this project. It's a very, very large project. And then they don't use Axure. And so, you know, what's going on? This is a beautiful picture. So I started by saying that I'm an independent consultant. I sometimes work with other agencies. Right now I'm with Razorfish. I work with all kinds of people, and sometimes I just am contracted independently by companies. And I like this flexibility. But I found Axure from the beginning, what won me over was that it really is a very profitable tool very early on. By profitable, I mean not even if you are someone like me who, you need to make a living. I know we all do it for the idealism and we want to make the user happy, but really, in the end, you really want to work less and make more, right? Otherwise, we find myself working many, many hours trying to do all kinds of inefficient things, and you look at how much you actually earned for an hour, and it's really sad. So this makes you happy more times. Potentially, it could make you happy, but it also make you sad. That's why this conversation today. So, by the way, feel free to stop me and ask questions. And it's just like, as was said, it's informal. So, it's a great Bob Dylan song, but yet again, things are changing. And this mobile first. So mobile first is in a way, it tends to be like another kind of, it's the latest catchphrase. Responsive is another thing, but responsive is more of a technical kind of. It's kind of was born from really developers. It's not a UX thing even. It's developers invented it. But now we inherited it and we need to live with it. But from a business perspective, mobile first is becoming probably a major driver to any company. Who here is involved with a company who's, well, I'll stop asking you, but probably all of you, I hope, are in a company that is really aware of what's going on. many companies realize that developing mobile applications, native apps for devices, it's like a never-ending, like a deep hole of expense that will never finish. So you might as well try to come up with another solution that works across all devices and so on. And that's really where this responsive web came from. But it's really driven by this mobile first, because companies realize they need to be everywhere, on every device. And from our perspective, I wrote UX risk, but it's really UX as us as practitioners, we use Axure. What it really means is it's more complexity for us. Because really now, we need to deal with at least 3 layouts. And not only there are 3 layouts, there are 3 layouts that ideally would be actually optimized, meaning that it's not like a copy and paste and organize 3 columns in 1 column and you're done. You actually need to think about what you'll do, what's the experience on a mobile versus what's on a tablet and so on. That's actually, it's a lot of work. Now, what I found is, as usual, while there's a lot of work, I think many customers or our clients, in their wisdom, they still think it takes about the same amount of time, probably the same amount of money. Well, it's like, what's your problem? That creates, again, on top of all the issues that many of us experience of irrational scheduling, planning, and on all of this, now it's kind of triples or more. So it's a real problem for us. So that's one thing. Another thing is that really, and that's a general UX perspective, things are changing. Today there was on NPR, they were talking about this brain, or maybe in the New York Times, interfaces that are controlled by the brain. You can apparently now think about things and the food will arrive, or whatever you want, just by creating all kinds of interestingly fantastic interfaces, which I hope will only come up when I retire, or probably after I die, which is what my preference is. Whatever comes first, but a lot of conventions that for many years we lay very comfortably on having our little reliable radio buttons and our little checkboxes and all of these things, with a few of these widgets, you're good to go. You just mix them around. And despite the fact that we're only very few of them, they still need us. Because no one could figure out, despite having so few UI widgets, the variability is endless. So you cannot actually come up with a good user interface. That's why we are there. So now we have, all the rules are broken. People do whatever. You can move your nose, you can move your hands, your fingers, you can jump, you can do. These are all interfaces, meaning our job is changing. But Axure and all the other tools, to be fair, these kind of tools, they really work well to the good old this, okay, maybe the phone. But we are really starting to have, we barely solve this problem because Axure and other tools are relatively new. So for UX, there aren't very many specialized tools. We barely go to a comfortable level. And now again, we are without real tools. So something to worry about, but we don't have to. And then scalability. So I would like to say a show of hands, a quick show of hands. Who experienced working with a team of more than 2 people on an Axure file? So yeah, so it's good. So good amount. So that the issues of working as a team, it raises up complexities that actually they grow exponentially the bigger the team becomes. So skill levels, obviously not everyone has the same skill level. It's hard to keep the team in sync, meaning typically when you have a team, you work in work streams, and people are in their silos, and then people just drive, they construct wireframes in all kinds of ways. They do things in their own ways, and it's hard to keep it all in sync. And so when you generate a specs, if you try to, you may get up all kinds of stuff and, you know, annotations and how to do it correctly. Things like that, this becomes very complicated to manage. And in some projects, at least in my experience, this becomes some people's full-time job on the team to manage the team and to manage the Axure files and the widget library and the style guide and all of that kind of stuff. So, any questions so far? Okay. So, I have only one objective today, because I think one is enough maybe. It's really how to operate it with your brain, but not really to think about it, how to move, you know, the mouse to make it click, but really to think first and then do Axure. What I found, at least so far, in all the projects that I've joined that already had something, typically they immediately started with the, you know, they already had prototypes and wire, you know, everything was already there. And suddenly reality struck and you have to do things like generating specifications, you have to do things. And like my grandmother used to say, give out, you know, what's going on? So, I was trying to be funny, so I said the brain is not included. I have to mention that here. Yeah. Okay, so I really simplify things. You know, we could spend here forever talking about, and you all know that, you know what we're doing, but I can try to break it into 3 phases. In the context of planning and logistics, and I think alignment is the first one, estimation, and then the construction, which we're not going to talk about at all. Maybe we'll have another session one day. But by alignment, I mean, it's really, when we come into a project, it doesn't matter whether you are working in-house with other colleagues from other departments, the business and so on, or you're a consultant, no matter what, you have to make sure that everyone's expectations about what you're going to deliver, you know, we're all on the same page. Because the fact that you know what a prototype is, it doesn't really mean that the client knows what a prototype is. They may have an idea of what a prototype, they maybe have seen a prototype, but they have no idea what it is. They don't know how much work actually goes into it. They just want something, you know, and you know, sometimes very ambitious things very quickly. So alignment is really one word, but it is around communications, about knowing in advance kind of what you're stepping into, and so that people will know, you know, that the development team is going to know what kind of specification documents you're going to provide. You know, what kind of a prototype, what level of fidelity, you know, all of these things, you better know in advance. And in advance, I mean, when you do the statement of work, when you plan your budget, when you plan, you know, this kind of in advance. Because otherwise, it can be a challenge to be successful. In my experience, and I hope that in your experience, what I find is if you start the conversation, you start an honest conversation with the stakeholders, and you explain right away why some assumptions are not realistic, or what needs to be done in order to get to where they want. If you start this conversation, it is easier later on when you hit some other snakes, and we all know that there are many, many snakes along the road, but it's easier to just work through the issues. But if you did not, you know, if there are these miscommunications, misunderstandings, there's not an alignment between you and your client and various teams there, because, you know, we all know the politics, the beautiful politics in a project. You know, you can very quickly have yourself enemies or people who are, you know, not really helping to make a success. in the end, we all want this to be a success, because for us, it's not a fun thing to work on a project that is not, you know, it's hard. And so you can make it easier. So we'll get to estimation also. So tonight, so my thought was we'll have a little simulation. And the way this is, it's fantastic. This is, again, there's a board here, two big boards there and a small board there. So you guys in the middle, you're out of luck. But that's okay. We'll see how it works. But in this simulation, again, it's really high level, you know. Unless you want to stay here the night and we can actually do something. We will simulate something that will give an opportunity, I hope, to think about and share some thoughts around this. So this is it. I'm going to be the client also. You can come and ask me. I'm going to you know, you'll have to work for me if you want, if I give you the project. So I'm iPadChicken.com, and we really think that friendship is better than soup. You know what shocked me? What shocked me was that there are actually tons of sites that deal with chickens. There are pet chickens for real. Like this is a show. You know, really. So in fact, I think I had pet chicken, or they are taken already. There are actually websites. So I think we have some limitation, but okay. So what is it? And by the way, you notice I dive right away because we had a lot to cover. But any questions about what I said so far? Any comments? Any thoughts? Or are we good to go? Kind of. All right. Okay. So I'm talking about now. It's a meeting. It's an introductory meeting, right? We meet. We are either in the, you know, we work together in this company, or I'm a consultant, or whatever. And I'm telling you, you know, this is the deal. This is what we want. The idea is that local farmers offer live pet chickens. So it's like the farmers will be able to offer the chicken inventory, right? And then the people will choose chickens and they purchase the chicken. And then veterinaries could offer services to check the chickens, and there'll be a whole market for accessories for chickens. Because don't you know, chickens are messy and they stink. And so there's like fantastic business. If you actually want to start something on your own, I think it will be good. So cleaning and sanitation, and it's a great business. So that's what the client says. Then you listen to that. And then the clients, I want you to, and I'll have this repeated, but it's like some clues here. Remember, that's the first meeting. So pay attention here. And I underlined kind of hot words. So it is a new brand for us, but we're a well-established company. So we are doing many other things. It's just another business for us. We need to have this up in 3 months. It's a must. We must have it in 3 months. And we kind of know what we want, as you could tell before. We kind of know what we want. So can you do it? And you don't have to answer right away. In your mind, you may be thinking, okay. I hope I did it right. I was trying to simulate how you'd say, okay, yeah, like that.
So would we be right in there asking, who's the brand manager? What's their track record with the company?
So you're kind of going towards the direction of you need to figure out actually, and we all know, I mean, sometimes if you work for a company, you have no choice, right? You know, this is what we're going to do. You have to do it, fine. But even regardless, there are many things in something like that where they're relevant. So we're doing this one. So the first task is kind of, we just divide it by groups like that, and you get together and you come up very quickly with questions that will, just questions, that will help you kind of decide if you want to accept the project and how you could maximize Axure. So, you know, I'll keep this up here. I'll give you 15 minutes to come up with as many questions as you can. You know, and you know there's some constraints. So you know you have to do it in 3 months. You kind of know what the scale and scope of this thing may be. You know it's a new brand, but it's an established company, so there might be some consequences for you, maybe. And things like that. So, and also there's a lot of stuff they would like to do, of course. But they just kind of don't know exactly, and you need to help them. So, why don't we do that? So, we said 15 minutes, so we'll just do group 1. By the way, is this clear? Do you kind of understand what we're going to do here? If you're done before that, don't worry. We don't have to kind of take the whole time, but as many questions as you can, and then we'll have a discussion about it, okay? Let's go.
What's being done?
You mentioned the 3 months scheduling.
Yeah.
Do we have that?
So maybe a couple more minutes, and then we can resume.
All right.
We can maximize Axure, you know, obviously we could come up with a spec, like if we, whatever features we decide on, we could, you know, we could come up with a spec. We could do UX testing if we wanted to. We could do mobile design
Well, the
work.
responsibility depending on what type of deliverables they want. So I mean, we can do lo-fi and hi-fi and test either one of those.
What was the one you mentioned on that below? Like how often?
Oh, the mobile, I thought we could do. So a lot of this is procedural stuff. What else could we do with Axure?
So in walking around the 3 groups, and they later on when they, you know, walk around, I took some photos, and when you compare it, it's very interesting to compare. You know, many of you brought up the right questions from kind of figuring out the project, trying to understand, you know, what's the budget, you know, stuff like that. There's just not enough time. I would love to, the next step would be to kind of maybe prioritize those questions and go over them and compare. But I wanted you, and I want you to think about, and I know that it was in a way not fair, because what I wanted you to think was to think about, in a way, Axure in understanding that, and some of you got it in some ways, because you couldn't guess what I mean. So I'm going to show you some questions, and you probably covered that in a way, but I'll tell you what I mean. So questions, answers, and implications. So for example, do you have business requirements? I'm telling you not really, because as I told you, I don't really know, I kind of know what I want. That means I don't really have business requirements. That means scope creep, constant change, like it's a mess. That means that when you think about building the Axure file, you kind of need to keep in your mind that you need to use it in masters. You need to work very efficiently so you can change very rapidly and adjust. What about mobile? Who here had mobile? You had mobile. Responsive, fantastic. So triple the design effort, at least. So branding and visual design. We have to do that, but that means that if you ever did a project that involved visual design, that can be a disaster because
But they know what they want.
no one knows what they know what they want.
They know what they want.
But what it means is that many times when you have a prototype and when you prepared it for usability, typically you have to refactor in the visual design into, because you start with wireframe. You know, we all like to do our little black and white things and how we are so pure. We do black and white and kind of, and then they want to actually see the visual design because this is the experience and not the grayscale is not the experience. This is the experience. But now you have this whole file and you need to actually skin it. And if you ever try to skin a full-blown prototype, it's actually, this refactoring, it's very expensive. It takes time. So if you don't know what I'm talking about,
You're saying
that's
you show them a wireframe before you show them the design?
we'll talk about it. These are just questions that you just kind of
I want to
understand.
see the pretty picture first. They don't care how.
We'll talk about it. So then, do they want usability testing? Is there enough time for it? We said 3 months. So for usability testing, you have to have recruiting to take place. You know, some planning. You have to think about it, and then you have to do the thing. You have to analyze it, and you need to actually put it into the design. Otherwise, what's the point? Is there enough time? I'm not even talking about budget. Or you can ask my niece or something like that. And then, what's the fidelity? This is a really, really important question. I'm asking fidelity as if the client knows what a fidelity means. And maybe they know it from stereo. And sometimes we ourselves don't know what fidelity means. It typically means, if you ask, you know, if we had a conversation around the room, it'll typically mean low fidelity will mean, oh, it'll be this grayscale, you know, boxes and arrows, something like that. Just kind of conceptualize where the high fidelity will be a fully clickable visual, you know, it'll be just like the real thing, except there's no back end, but just that. And another piece of it is, has to do with how much of it is actually high fidelity, meaning some people may think that you're going to actually walk them through the entire experience, every screen, everything needs to be done in high fidelity. This is a crazy amount of work, right? But that, I was in project that was completely an expectation because they don't know. And it just why would they know? Unless you communicate something like that. So that's a question. What about specifications? So many times, again, it's not exactly clear what are specifications, and it's good to ask to see an example of what they use now, and don't be surprised if they tell you that they don't have an example, because even though they've been doing it for many years, they don't quite have a format, and they'll find something. And so then you have to work to kind of think about it, find what to do. And then, where is the development done? Many of you touched on that, but typically you hear more and more it's done overseas. That there's a small group in-house, you know, they vet everything, they prepare documentation, and then everything ships out. What it means is that typically, because of the way outsourcing works, that means really the specs need to be understood by, you know, it's a challenge because overseas someone just gets a piece of paper, they have to build it, they have no context, they have no idea what they're doing, you know, they probably work hard, except they have no idea. And if it's not there, they'll just do something. And so that means that you need to understand something about what exactly it means, what kind of specifications and work together. Remember, all of this is about alignment. and all of this kind of stuff. And then, actually, can we use Axure? The clue there was we are a well-established company, you know. And if you ask me, I say that we have an IT group and we do everything. Whoever had here a pushback? Because what is Axure? No, we don't use this kind of tools. So first of all, you have to establish that you can use Axure, because they may not want you to. They want Visio, they want whatever. Let's say they do. That still doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to be a smooth sailing, right? For a variety of reasons. But do these questions make sense now? And so I think all of these questions, many of them are, of course, repeated here and are very legitimate. But again, in the context of Axure, these really, if you did not ask them or you did not think about it in advance, or you get them after you're actually committed and you're kind of working, and suddenly in meetings people suddenly start talking about the kind of prototype they want and things like that, you can be in a hole. So this is where you look at this information and probably ask some more questions, and you can come back and say, you know what? Cannot be done in 3 months. No, sorry, cannot be done. Obviously, you don't just throw it away just like that. But what I find in my experience is this: when they say 3 months, it doesn't really matter. It can be 3 months, it can be 6 months. This is just a number. This is just a number. It's completely arbitrary, and usually, if they want to succeed, if you talk about success and you try to communicate that, and then you have a choice. You can walk away if you want, or you can dive into it, or sometimes you just have to do it because you work there. But these are the kind of things, it's our responsibility from a UX perspective, I believe, is not only to lead the design and to make it whatever it will do to the user, but also protect the client from themselves. We know what's involved. Many times they don't know. So, how much are we? I don't know how much time we actually have, but it's 7:30.
It's 7:30, so we were figuring we wrap about 8:15.
Okay, so I'll go quickly then, because we just began. No? So then more about Axure. So the Axure impact. So again, flexibility in construction to minimize the, if there are no requirements, there's no point creating complex interactions and stuff like that, because you'll have to do a lot of rework. Mobile means you have to think about a construction strategy that will actually make sense, that you can deal with those layouts. Branding and visual design, you'll have to refactor. Again, we said usability testing, that's actually a point. So if you're going to do usability testing, it will be good to actually figure out in advance what you're going to test, so what kind of flows, and then prototype, and not start prototyping and do some of the screens. Then you get this scenario, then you're maybe missing stuff, you may have all kinds of data. One of the big pain points in Axure is that there's no way to actually hook up even an Excel spreadsheet to have more dynamic flow, of data to simulate transactions and things like that. And any of us who do, you often have to simulate. This is a transactional website. You have to have, so it's hard. So the more manual things we do, the more things we have to redo, and it's really expensive for us. So again, we talked about the impact on development, and then obviously we want to know. So this was that point about communications. Any questions? No? All right. So now we go to estimation. I wrote for sanity and profit, because for profit means someone will profit. It's either you, or your boss, the company you work for, because obviously the more accurate the estimation, it's less expensive and less time consuming. I think I have it in some slide, but in case I forgot that I have it or whatnot, it's really, there's the saying that and you probably know that 9 women cannot have a baby in 1 month, right? So some things you cannot do faster. What can you do? You cannot bring more people to solve a problem. And that's because in UX, scaling up is actually not a good thing. The bigger the UX team, it actually can become much more complicated to sync everyone up. And you know, if you did that, you know. So let's talk about some planning fallacies and how to avoid them, actually. And I'll do it very quickly, but I'm going to, let's try to do, I should have done it on the survey, but I didn't think about it. Okay. I'll ask you very quickly, and we'll do a show of hand. Okay, so how many working days are in, let's say in May? How many working days? Who is for 31 days? Working days. 31 days in, who buys 31 days? Okay, great. I have to talk to you later. Who is for 23 days in March? 23 days in March. Don't look at the calendars, but you can look at the calendar, but 23 days in March. Who buys that? Anyone? Okay. 22 days in March. Okay. And finally, who is for 20 days in March? Okay, most of you. Fantastic. So let's see why. So 31 days means you are willing to work like basically the whole, like you're just working. 23 means you want to have weekends off. 22 is if you looked at the calendar, you see it's actually Memorial Day, Monday, likely you don't want to work. And then 20 days is, you know, stuff happens to you and you may be sick, you may, I don't know what, but you have to build in the cushion. You may end up actually working 22 days, 23 days. You may actually work 31 days. That's not the point. The point is when you make an estimation, you have to estimate on 20 because that is kind of, I mean, it can be worse. You can be hit by a truck and then you only work maybe 1 day and that was before you got hit by the truck. Then it's big, and that's another story. So, but if you notice, it's like what we're talking about is a huge, you know, it's like 30% gap. So when you make a plan, everyone who saw a project plan, you know what I'm talking about. We'll get to it soon. So my next question is, how many working hours are in a day? Okay, so we have 24, 16, 12, 8, and 3.
With or without caffeine?
I don't know what you do. You can do drugs. I don't know. Who is for, let's say, who is for 12 hours? 12 working hours a day. Who is for 3 hours a day?
I'm for that.
Who is for 8 hours a day? Okay, so most of you are on 8 hours a day. Some of you, quite a bit, are for 3 hours a day. That's a lazy bunch of people. Unbelievable. And then, of course, no one wants to work 24 hours a day, even though I have a feeling that many of you actually maybe were close to doing that a few times in your life. So, so I was cloned, I don't have a life, I'm dedicated, I do have life outside of work, but then I ask, what is work? Plus, I have life out of work. So I was thinking about it. I am obsessed with that thing for some reason, which means this is why I work maybe only 2 hours a day. But I was trying to think about that. So in a project plan, typically, they'll say fine that 22 days because there's Memorial Day. It's 8 times 22, 176 hours, that's 100%. When you do the math, you get 3 hours times 20. That's 30% of this 100. So now, time to think in a project plan, there's no time to think, right? There is no thinking. You just go one time, bam, 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 bam. Time allocated for stakeout. Basically, there'll be a milestone review, right? A review today, tomorrow, boom. Now, I don't know where you live or whatever. I have never been on a project where you actually review something and you can, first of all, get all the stakeholders on the same meeting, not to say, actually, they want to review. It's only fair. It takes a few days. if it's a big project, multiple stakeholders across continents, across I don't know what. But it is not built into the project unless you insist. Time allocated for dealing with snags. There are no snags, everything working fantastically. So you never lose any time because this variable didn't work or whatever. As you can see, this column here it actually starts adding up. Time allocated for goofing off. Yes, okay. You know what? Well, I don't know what you do, but we all find ways to waste a lot of time in a very productive way. I'm very generous, 10%. I'll give you 10%. Okay, maybe it's more. And then, you know, time for other things that you have to take care of. So see, that's 100 and that's 100. It's like we got 100%, except I need to, you know, and that's a paradox. It's really, this is where some of the planning fallacy is, and many people write about it and talk about it, is there's a big disconnect between how projects are typically planned. They don't really, especially they don't bring any time for thinking, for reviews. Many of them don't even have correctly usability testing. The time that actually takes to implement the what happened. And so if you may ask, well, what does it have to do with the Axure? Well, it has a lot to do with Axure in that when you know all the work you need to do, and then you think about how many hours you're going to spend in meetings, which sometimes in some project you may be spending 60, 70% of your week in meetings for figuring out requirements and all kinds of meetings. There's actually not that much time left for you to actually sit on Axure and do work. If that's your work, to actually to do also Axure work. That puts a lot of pressure on you in terms of, you know, you are trying to work on it, you know, 20 hours a week, but and 20 days, but there's a lot of work. So in terms of the basic Axure, it's not just Axure necessarily, but with Axure, the thing is, these are just a few inputs. You know, we're all familiar with the business requirements, all kinds of constraints. You can do this, you can't do that. User roles, user tasks. You know, okay, we all know that stuff. And we use Axure to put the UI. And typically, we would generate the prototype and the specifications. Sometimes the specification. Who here never was asked to do or worked in a project that did not require specifications? Yeah, okay. And I think sometimes you see it's actually happening more and more where they realize no one reads them. Why bother? That's another question. So, but actually some people, many people actually do read them in India, somewhere. They try to read them. Many times we actually have to do them. But then there are other work products. Sometimes they are actually formal deliverables. You have to do progress reports. You have to do traceability. You know, you have to do user testing and analyze it. So this is kind of where we live. We live in this area. And so the next day, and we have to do it quickly. Well, we have a little bit of time. So I wanted to, well, we said 3 months, and you're kind of very tempted to do it for a variety of reasons, including the fact that you don't have much money to, you need to do it. So I put together a very, very kind of raw, it's very high level, you know, discovery, analysis, you have to develop a high level concept, detailed design, and specifications. You have 3 months to do it, or whatever you think. You know, I'm telling you I need it done in 3 months. And let's suppose you have to do it. Requirements are going to happen throughout because I told you I kind of know what I want, meaning that when you actually generate the specifications, you'll have the requirements written for you just in time, right? That's how it happens. It's fantastic synchronization. So again, you have the blocks for reference, and I think it'll be good to, again, break into teams and try to basically, against each one, think about it, and really try to think again about Axure in some level. and try to, from your experience or the shared experience of the group, because some of you have more experience than others, and then you know, just try to see how many weeks, days. Let's do it in days. How many days it'll do, and let's see if it can be done in 3 months or whatever you end up with. I'm really interesting to see the one. Actually, there's a few people here that actually have been using Axure for a long time. If you can identify yourself, maybe we'll make sure that there's at least one very experienced Axure user in every group. So you're one. Anyone in your group that has been using Axure for a long while? You?
No, I was waiting until somebody started.
Here, how many people are kind of, they feel they know Axure well enough so they could actually move there? And some, okay. Fantastic. So let's get the clock. It's 7:48. Let's try to be done by 8, okay? That's how you do it in real life. It's like, it's not different.
Well, the user testing for this.
So we got 15 minutes to qualify. First session.
Hi, Ezra, can you leave that last slide on this?
I think I have sorry.
There you go.
I stepped ahead of myself.
Let's make the assumption the client is on the premises.
Hey, Ezra, are we assuming we're a one-person team?
I'm sorry?
Are we assuming we're a one-person team?
All right. And there's a great point of contact for who's going to give us everything we need.
Yeah, let's do that for
Business requirements, so there is no.
I forgot to give you one important. So it's only you, one person.
It's one person
One
doing all
person.
this?
I'm sorry.
תודה. תודה שלפני תודה רבה, אני צריכה תודה, ביי.
Programming analysis phase, they'll all save us time in conceptual and detailed design phases. So, what are your thoughts on the discovery of that timeline? Discovery and analysis. Yeah.
I would assume. I thought he said we need the site.
That's a big assumption. That's a big assumption for sure. So, what are you guys thoughts? How many days are we comfortable with? Because you got to factor into user research. Are we doing interest focus groups? Are we annotating things? So, like, there's a lot of suggestions.
Well, working backwards, if we do everything correct in Axure, then the specifications should be increased. So why don't we estimate that?
That's right.
Which?
That's how I can do that. She'll make that an
Well, that's right. So then there's
we're taking the job. We gotta give them all parts.
I don't think we're tied to the 3 months either.
But you can give it that.
And he actually wants to see where we would like to, even if it's not 30 days, just to see how we do this.
So then let's do more. It's still fast. So 10 days for discovery. You think discovery?
for analysis to
Yeah, it feels like anything would.
Well, that's 50 days. I mean, the testing's going to need the most time. What's going to happen is let's assume you're going to do a major sprint, right? Discovery and analysis.
Do long pass, and then we can discuss.
Agree to that. So you might be able to get it for 2
So 10,
weeks. Okay, 3 and a half
10
weeks.
o'clock.
Then when you can come on the whole site, right? Micro site. Then I'm just thinking out loud, but anyone
Alright,
trying to
so
say no, you're crazy.
you have 50 days.
Good, 60 days. Yeah, start your test there.
Discovery again. Ezra's BT.
Let's say that you're doing.
So that's why we're gonna think about
If
if I had 2 weeks, these specs probably wouldn't take as much. Probably will take more like 5 days because you're gonna build a lot of that time into the design itself to make applications.
Let's just start
So I would say it's more like 5 days. That time is transferred into design.
2 weeks of discovery, 2 weeks of analysis.
Okay, but we already have it there, so let's say your scenario, so
Weeks of concept.
typical website, small microsite might have, now we have 5 pages.
So you're thinking, are you thinking like 2 weeks for this, 2 weeks for this?
Just
Well,
to
yeah,
start.
that's for the requirements.
Right.
So that leaves you 8
One thing
weeks
that's
to
not
do
listed
this
there is
part.
review time. We don't know when we review things.
And I would think you would need like 3 weeks to do this, 3 weeks instead of 2 for this at least.
So usually iteration like
Or,
that.
you know, 2
Or
or
I would
2.
think details.
Right, but if you loop, actually, you go back to 10 days.
Assuming we're gonna do low 5.
Yeah, maybe 2 weeks for this, 3 weeks for this, 3 weeks for that.
Okay, so we'll have a review here.
2, 3, 3, or 2, 4, 2.
So
I'm actually thinking that.
Did you not have a review after your analysis?
Yeah, I mean, just sort of haven't gotten.
So how many reviews do we want for the conceptual?
Yeah, it's really testing.
Prototyping user test.
I'd say like
For
2, 4, 2.
conceptual usually it's fine.
And you're just gonna
Very
want
high level. The more details you can use here, internal and external.
So if you're doing a type, maybe one for the high level.
I call it the co-creation concept, you know, your basic knowledge.
But,
Basic,
Oh, yeah.
low fidelity, right, prototypes, and you kind of walk through
Yeah,
the
and we don't know if we're talking about
Alright.
12 pages.
Right.
And then you have to maybe do
So we have
another
definitely
round
how many days left? 3, 2, so we have 12 days.
based on that feedback.
So what about the analysis portion, models, flow strategy, would that really take, I mean, based on the scope of the project, let's assume that it's a medium to high scope. The flows, the side map data.
The more time you put in, so that.
High level concept.
So they understand, especially if there's e-commerce involved,
Some
find,
wireframes
you
to
know,
start with.
locators,
Okay.
There's a lot that can be done with a user
you
form.
could do
Because
flows.
they give high
Would it be fair to say, would it be fair to say that
Panels
they'll
going, stuff, so we kind of show what the plane will
We
go.
already
move it in there?
already have, yeah.
I mean, we could need a bank within 5 days that are like floating there always as like concept.
In the discovery?
I think you need to do a review of the analysis though, if you're gonna do task flows, to get buy-off on,
Okay, so we have models, flow, strategy.
to make sure that the client's on board with all that before you proceed.
Should we say 2 reviews, internally and
Probably
externally?
An interaction is kind of complex. It makes it a lot
Okay.
going around trying to explain that to the client. So
Okay.
we can go ahead and build it out.
It's 5 days left. That's not correct.
For the design, 2 days, 2 weeks. Is that realistic?
We might need more time in design if we're incorporating an outside designer.
Percent two in this amount of time.
Well, see, I guess my thought is that if the client has a lot of different concepts, you could do, the prototype doesn't have to be agile. I mean, doesn't have to be an Axure right away. You could do something, you can do paper prototypes, you could do something real quick.
For the usability testing, in my
Yeah,
experience.
but you're right,
takes at least
that
5
means in the
days.
scope of this project, you're just making the assumption that there's really like 2 or 3, maybe 2 different concepts, I'm sure.
1 day to run the actual test, 1 day to analyze the data, and half the day to.
So we can get it
I know,
on
it's a
one
little
time.
optimistic.
It's not as the client, if you're responsive, you don't really have an option because the website needs to be functional on laptop. You know, it has to be a desktop. Or tablet, you know.
They do have to be.
Should we use some, because we have,
That's why I wrote that.
so.
217.
Just do what slide you're on.
Here, you want to say then
like 2
5 days.
Yeah, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 7 weeks,
and changes.
Actually,
And 5 days.
spec generation lecture is pretty quick.
Okay.
So if you got all your nails in a row,
I feel like we have to get their buy-in, like saying, this is what we're proposing, and you know, this means that you have responsibilities to it, and you're
Right.
gonna come, you're gonna give us what we need in 1.5 weeks, and we're gonna make this, you
How
know.
many days do we have left?
There's one thing I've learned
So,
is when you're in
5,
cases like this where they're telling you the deadline is tight, then you read the contract that says that every time they slip up on handing you something, your deadline extends by the period of time that you waited. Because if you don't, you're in situations where people are still holding you to their 12-week
The
deadline,
other thing-
but they slow you by 3 weeks.
We don't have any slack time. I mean, are we building that into our 4-week time?
Yeah.
I think we have to assume that there's.
Sorry, John.
And what about like changes after the user testing too? Because I mean, you know, you may uncover some big things, you have to go back and do a lot of stuff on it.
That's why we tell them it's 4 weeks.
Yeah, and we'd want to do the testing not at the end of the 4 weeks, but somewhere in the middle. Right.
Yeah, because you've got to take like
Is
1
2 weeks enough for the high-level concept?
That's where I would put the half a week and take it off the specs.
Really?
Yeah. Because that'll.
Anyone here actually had to deal with planning projects, like the insight inputs into the project timeline? So some of you did. In planning, actually, a project plan like that, from end to end. So some of you did, and and it was fascinating walking around because I've been to projects where it, you know, coming in the timeline. So when you say 3 months to do this project, sounds insane. But typically you hear very insane things on very, very large projects. And it looks insane, and we need to work, so we deal with insanity a lot. And so, all right, well, so from an Axure perspective, and some of that you touched on, just some, so there are generic, what I call flux and churn clusters. So where you can, it's not exactly a heat map, but so there are some activities that are really, have a really bad impact on Axure when you think about it. So for example, requirements can have massive, crazy, I call it, impact on Axure, because if there's a lot of requirement changing, new requirements coming in, there's no structure, usually because there's no structure for sign-off, for requirement change, you know, it's just a jungle. If you're in something like that, and you don't have it laid out well in advance that it's a no-no, then you're going to, you know, it's going to massively impact the way you work. Responsiveness. Again, it can be considerable to massive. Now, when I say responsive in Axure, in my opinion, I know there's some hacks around making Axure act responsive. Meaning, you know, you move the browser and it kind of changes. It's a waste of time, in my opinion, because our job is not to simulate the dragon, bless you. Our job is really to provide the optimized user experience for those device layouts. You see, this is confirmation. So, but I think sometimes, and again, I'll get to it later, sometimes people think that in Axure, just because you can, you do it. But you know, you're wasting your energy. However, that means a lot of upfront thinking about coming up with requirements, you know, to 3 types of layouts. So if your requirements are to begin with shaky, you have to deal with the 3 different layouts, you're there for a massive headache. Visual design. Again, if there is a branding agency, so depending on what the circumstances are, you know, but generically speaking, sometimes if it's a corporation, they own the brand, and they will tell you what is, you know, that's one option. So you have to work with there. If there's another agency that is the agency of record and they do this, then many times they think they are actually doing the user experience as well, and you are competing with them. And so that's a very delicate balance. Sometimes you may find yourself with, and some of you may find yourself in this tension situation with a agency of record. And then, regardless, if you start with Axure, and as we said, you start in grayscale and so on, and then you have to lay on top of that the visual design very quickly for usability testing or whatever, it's a lot of work. So in Axure, instead of, you can do things like using the style editor. Who uses the technique of actually, when you have a widget, create custom styles and apply a custom style to the widget instead of actually manually picking up. Very good. 2, those of you who do the work but don't do that, look into the style editor. It's the closest thing you have there to be your friend, real dear friend. It's not a style sheet, but what it does, it creates you define, like in Word, and you define a style, and you apply that style to all the widgets you want. And then if the style changes, because the visual design changes, you can change it remarkably fast. So this is the kind of thing, usability testing can be a massive thing, because if you did not plan ahead your scenarios and suddenly you have to do them, and it needs to be kind of behaving, and you have to code, and there's some questions around to what degree does everything need to work. Some people say, yeah, everything needs to be working because you're testing. Again, you can have massive. The prototype itself, if you build a complex one, because you know how to do it, and you do variables and functions and all kinds of stuff, well, then you are maintaining your own prototype. You have to manage that. You have to, again, deal with it, and that can be a big issue. And then finally, as we saw early at the beginning, at what people wrote about their experience, if they had experience with specs, the generation, if you don't try to generate specs very early on at the beginning, but you kind of wait, in the end, we have to do it at the end, and that's when we're going to do the specs. If you do that, you are likely to be doomed, because you are going to end up with a document of 1,560 pages where no one can understand. So again, Axure can be configured to create really readable specifications. It's not easy, it's not trivial, but it's doable. You just need to work with it. And you need to think about how you wireframe so that it comes out right. Again, this is not a construction session. Maybe we'll do something to talk about that, but these are just, again, is things that you want to be aware of. So then there are all these hedges. So if, highly nested dynamic panels, try to avoid them, because the more you nest dynamic panels into dynamic panels, like the Russian dolls, this, specs will come out weird, and you're not going to figure out what's going on. Refactoring the prototype, so create a custom widget and use masters. Use many things you can do as shortcuts. Complex interactions, document. If you use variables, document what they mean and what the values are, because you are going to forget in 2 weeks what you were going to do there. You see, I wrote here create, and I didn't finish my sentence, so I have no idea what I meant, and I did it maybe recently. Use prototype for usability testing. So again, determine the grid scenarios. By the way, we'll share this. You don't have to worry about. We'll make it available, this PowerPoint. So, and then consumable specifications. Sometimes I don't know if it's ideal, but sometimes you want to consider having one Axure file for specifications and one just for UT, which you throw away or whatever you do with it, but you don't use one to do both. Again, it's a matter of, sometimes it's tactical, sometimes it's strategic, but if both of them are equally important, you know, it can be a big time saver. And then we're getting to a summary part, and then maybe we'll have questions if you want. So some reality checks. If you can push back on unrealistic timelines, I know it's scary, but I found it to be fairly successful. If you are not dealing with reasonable people, then it's going to be a problem. You know, you can at least push back. If you don't push back, then you cannot complain later because you didn't say anything. And then again, this 9 women cannot deliver. So what's important is early on at the beginning, try to see the project plan, the entire project plan, and especially what they have for the user, for UX, and see if there is actually time, if there are spaces for thinking. Make them up. I mean, you don't have to call them thinking time because people in corporations, they don't like to think. As think is not considered, doesn't bring profit. But you know, actually it's successful if you use it. To say we need time to think, you know.
We use the word optimization.
Optimization is not, I think it's hard to understand what it means because to optimize, you optimize something that already exists and you just make it a little better, you tweak it here and there. But to think about it. I'm telling you, do for me something creative, competitive, and so on. You need to understand what's going on, you need to digest, you need to time, and then you'll have a concept. Usually it happens in the shower, but it's not going to happen because on the project plan, on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you had interviews and whatever, and on Thursday, that's when you had your concept ready. Because it just doesn't work like that if there's no time, at least the weekend, something. So building time for reflection, for reviews. You know, the reality is this. Everyone you work with, you know, they were not born yesterday. Meaning, many people were in projects that failed or were stressed because it was not realistic. So they know that if they say 3 months, 3 months will pass, and then it's going to turn into 6 months and 9 months. Because what can you do? It's just not going to happen. Unless you really spend a lot of money, you bring, you know, I don't know what. Might as well be a little realistic up front, and it kind of pays off later. Change management is really, really important. This is sometimes hard to know very early on, but if you ask, when you actually talk, you know, we go and we talk with the development department and we talk with people, try to see what's in place for sign-off, you know, for process. If there are no processes for UX, if there are no set that says, you know, we're going to develop requirements together, we're going to have a draft ready, we're going to look at it. If the stuff like this is not there, if it's just ad hoc, it's going to kill you know? And then for change control, because change control means you agreed and they signed on the requirements and you did your work and they signed off of it, and then they turn around and they change it, you know, because we spoke with someone and they want you to change it. Fine, you can change it, but there needs to be a change control, meaning I get paid for my work, we have more time to do it, and it's just not ad hoc. Again, some projects are very small, you know, this is kind of a big generic thing. So some projects will be too small to have formalities like that. But there needs to be an agreement, and there needs to be, again, alignment. You know, we need to have this, either formal or informal, but we need to have an agreement that we work together as a partnership to make this successful. And finally, traceability. I have yet to see an actual prototype, except those that I do, and even then I sometimes get lazy, that actually use naming conventions. I don't know who here actually right off the bat starts to actually put IDs for wonderful. Now, this looks like a lot of work and maybe unnecessary, but you know what? If you need to actually, you have a spec, and you need to say, you know, requirement number 1, traces, it actually, it's